Happy Wednesday, everyone. Thanks for joining us here today for another session of our Alteryx Server Webinar Series. As usual, I'm Fernando Vizcaino. For those who don't know me, I'm working here in data mining as part of the enablement team. I'm also an Alteryx ace for a year and a half, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I have all the certifications there, so designer, server, partner, sales certification as well. And I'm also a top contributor there on the Alteryx community. So once again, maybe if you are asking a lot of questions there, maybe you'll find me there. And if you find me there, please give me a like there. That's always great for me to improve my rankings, right? And I'm working with Alteryx for 7 years, and I plan to work a lot more years from now on, actually. So we are right in the middle of our sessions here. So it's our 4th session of a 7 video series here. We talked already of everything related to Alteryx server and scaling. So now we have an idea of what Alteryx server is for. And if you start having more and more users, more and more workflows, what you can do to manage everything that is happening there, as well as how to configure everything the best way possible. So it was more for the system administrator guy, or for you that's planning on purchasing Alteryx server. But now we're going to be changing gears a bit. We're going to be starting talking about the Alteryx gallery. So today we're going to be talking about the user side overview. So for the end users, for the developers there that want to start leveraging Alteryx server to sharing, scheduling, and anything that we talk about during our previous sessions, that's today. All right. But of course, everything from the gallery perspective and administrative overview as well. So we're going to be talking during our next session about that. So for you, the gallery administrator, how you can deal with that amount of users, that amount of workflows. So that's for our next session, as well as everything related to connecting to the Alteryx server from a different platform. And lastly, but not least, that's actually a very important session, is for me to show you everything related to the production process plus analytical apps. So the idea there, of course, today you're going to be seeing everything related to the gallery. But on last session, I'm going to be showing everything from connecting your designer to the gallery, errors that you might encounter there. So that's one session that's you can't miss, actually. So it's a very important one. And of course, really that's at the end, because this is the most important one. But moving forward, today we're going to be talking about the user side overview and all the configurations that can be done there. So the agenda for today is going to be the gallery overview. You start understanding everything that you have there. So it's a basic layout, all the roles. So as an end user, the developer, the administrator, everything that you have there, as well as how you can share. So the methods of sharing and collaborating with other users or developers, right? And of course, I'm going to walk you through all the pages that you have there, from the landing page, the home, for all the information here and what is all used for. All right, but let's get started. So first, let's understand about the basic layout. So when you think about the gallery, you have 2 different segments there. So you have a public component there. So the public component there, you have, it's for all the users that have access to your gallery. So for all the users that you are public sharing something, and when I say here, all the users, I'm meaning the users from within your company. We talked about this in the previous session. So you are able to connect to your Active Directory, for example. So the Alteryx gallery will be accessible for all the users from within your Active Directory, right? So of course, here we have our Alteryx gallery, our homepage, where everything that's been public share will be there. But of course, as it starts to grow, as you start to have more and more workflows, more and more users, macros, or anything else there, maybe it's better for you to start organizing everything. Once again, this is the public part, all the users have access to. So for example here, so for the user that are just connecting for the first time to the Alteryx gallery, maybe you can create a district with examples of workflows, examples of outputs, or you can have a district related to a specific project, a specific public project that everyone can have access to. So let's say, for example, you have one workflow that can get everything related to HR, all the data related to you as a user or as a collaborator there. Then you can run that workflow and get information about your hours, the amount of work that has been done during the week. So that's one example for you to have a workflow share publicly. But of course, you have the private component of the Alteryx server, and that you have ways of organizing as well. So the districts is for public workflows, the collections are for private workflows. And that's basically the same idea. The main difference here is that the collections, so you as a developer there, you will be able to decide who that content will be shared with. Right, so you will start including the users there. So it can be another developer to help you with something, or the end users that you want to be consuming that information, that workflow that you just created, or that output, for example, right? But in order for you to start sharing everything in your collection, you need to publish that workflow to your Alteryx gallery. And that's all manageable from within your private studio. So you, as a developer, you have access to one private studio, and from there, you will be able to decide what you want to do. So maybe you can start sharing that with everyone. Maybe that's something that you find very interesting there and would be shared with all the users there. Or maybe it's something that you develop for your area or for a specific user, and then you can create a specific collection for that user to have access, right? But of course, the user roles is manageable as well. So for the end users to have access to a district or to a collection, that's one thing that your administrator needs to decide, but that's something we are going to be talking about now. So Alteryx Gallery, you have actually 5 different rows. Of course, you can see here it's 4. Doesn't mean that I don't know how to count, but it's actually because you have 2 rows for viewers and member. But let's start by talking about the creator. So the creator is your administrator. So it's not only one administrator, you can have multiples there. But the whole idea for the creator is that he's managing the whole gallery. So everything that you are seeing as a developer or an end user, that was all defined by your creator. That doesn't mean that your creator, since he has access to everything there, that he will be able to run your workflow or to consume the inputs that actually he can't. So the whole idea is that he will be able to see everything that is happening there, but he will only be able to run a specific workflow, your workflow, if you give him permission to do so. All right. So if you are the workflow owner, that means that you are an artisan. So the simplest way of us defining an artisan, that's one user that has one Alteryx designer license. So as I mentioned in the previous sessions, everything is done by your Alteryx designer. And from there, you start publishing to your gallery, right? So as an artisan, you have access to only one private studio, and you can start creating your collections. You can start making those workflows public and adding that to a specific district as well. All right. But of course, we have the end users. So users that don't have access to Alteryx Designer or doesn't want to have the knowledge or develop workflows. So you can be a viewer or a member. So when we think about the Alteryx gallery, actually, so the licensing actually, so it's licensed by cars, by number of cars. And when we think about end users, so you don't need to have a license to run a workflow or to view a workflow. That's one of the greatest thing about the Alteryx gallery. So you can have an infinite amount of users consuming one specific workflow, and you are only paying by the number of cars. Okay, so the main difference here between viewer and member is that viewers can only run workflows public shared, and member the workflows that are public but also private. So viewer will be able to see the landing page, the home page, as well as the districts, and the member will be able to see everything that the viewer are seeing, as well as the collections. So he'll be able to run more workflows there. But of course, we have one additional role here related to no access, actually. So in our example here, the data meaning Alteryx server, since it's all connected to the Active Directory, and I want to have control of the users that are entering there, then I can leave as default a no access role. Or I can leave as default for a specific user group from my Active Directory. So all of those users will have a no access role, or all of those users will have a curator role. So that's something that we are going to be talking about during our next session. But the whole idea that you can start leveraging your Active Directory to do everything there. So you don't have to do that manually. Of course you can if you want to, but there are ways of you automatizing the whole thing there, the same way as you are already doing with Alteryx Designer, right? But for those that like tables, so here you have everything related to the permissions that each of the rows have. And as you can see, the creator have everything that an artisan have, as well the member and viewer, and the no access has no access, right? But that's basically it. But of course, everything related here, for example, for artisans to start, for example, creating collections or adding assets to collections, that's all manageable as well by the creator. So the creator can give or remove permissions from users, from artisans, or from curators as well. So that's the idea for the creator, to manage everything that is happening there. But let's talk about collaboration here. So as I mentioned before, so the idea for you as an user, as an artisan, as a developer, actually. So, and I'm saying all of those words for you to start memorizing that. So an artisan is a developer, and as a developer on Alteryx server, a private studio is automatically created for you. So you can have one studio for you only, but you can have a studio for multiple users. So you can have a marketing studio, or you can have a project related studio as well, right? So the only rule that you always need to be aware here. So, okay, so have the user one that is here, the user one studio, and you want to move, and you have a lot of workflows here developed by this specific user, and you want to move this workflow for a marketing studio, but I start leveraging the collaboration, the versioning, and everything related to studios that we can do. But the idea is that for the user, the artisan, he can only have one studio at a time. He can be in one studio at a time. So that means that if you add the user here in the marketing studio, he will lose access to his private studio. The workflows will be there, but he'll have no access to do so. Of course, you can add another user there to get those workflows, but the idea is that only one studio per user, but multiple users per studio. That's possible. All right. And let's think about the workflow and the collaboration. So you as an artisan, you will be able to start publishing your workflow to a studio, right? So your workflow is here. You have options there for you to start including in a specific collection, for you to start sharing with end users. So you decide to share that with marketing users, for example. One other option that you have there is that you can start sharing that to your company gallery, your public gallery. And there you can have multiple districts. And it's basically the same idea. But one thing here that you always need to be aware is that your workflow is always in your studio. So of course, you can remove the workflow from a district, you can remove the workflow from a collection, but that doesn't mean that your workflow was deleted. That only means that the workflow isn't accessible anymore from these places. So if you want to delete a workflow, you need to go to your private studio and delete that workflow from there. And that, of course, will delete the workflow from any of the other places here. But keep in mind always that the workflow always stays in your private studio. Okay? That's the only message here. But let's start understanding everything that I'm saying right now. So the first step there, so here is your private gallery. You have everything there. You have, for example, here the home page, the districts page, private studio page, insights, collection, workflow results, and schedules page, right? We are going to be covering everything here during this session, but let's talk first about your user. So you just, it's the first time that you are there in your private gallery, in your gallery actually, and you want to understand your permissions, for example. So you can go to your name there. Since I'm an admin, I have one option, additional option here for me to go to the admin page. But as of now, let's go to my profile. So when I go there, the first thing that I can see here, my name information, my time zone as well. That's very important for working in a lot of different time zones. But here I can see the permissions that I currently have. So I'm a curator. That means that I'm also an artisan. So I can administrate the server, but I can also create workflows and publish to the gallery. And I'm also able here to, for example, create new collections to start sharing with other users. And if I'm unable to do, and I don't have permissions to create new collections, so that's the admin is responsible for that. And then they will create a collection for me. And then maybe I will be able to start sharing that with the users. And here I say maybe because it's all related to the permissions that you can have there. So of course, if you have everything like myself here, all yeses, so I'm able to create, schedule jobs, prioritize jobs and assign jobs as well as have access to the APIs. This is for our 6th session there. And if you recall, prioritizing and assigning jobs is when we are thinking about multiple nodes, multiple worker nodes for me to actually define where my workflow will run. Okay, so here's the first step. Take a look on your permissions, see if you have permission to create a collection, and if not, and if you feel like you need that permission, so you need to ask your curator for that. Okay, You have also the notifications page here. Very simple, but since maybe if you are in a lot of different collections there, and you have a lot of workflows, a lot of users, then you start receiving a lot of emails. If everything that has been shared with you or anything that was updated, so this for you to simplify and stop receiving those, right? You have your keys here. This is more related to the gallery APIs, all right? And here as well, you have the version. So you have the client version. So it's your Alteryx Designer version, if you are an artisan or creator, of course, and your server version as well. So the only rule here is that the Alteryx server is should always be the same version or higher version than Alteryx Designer, as here, right? But moving forward here, so now we are on our Alteryx gallery, we are on a home page. Here it's all public. You can see here that, for example, we have workflows, but we have also analytical apps, and we have macros as well. So here are tools that you can start sharing with other users. Analytical apps are workflows that have user interface in it, but you also have workflows, right? You can see, for example, so if you want another view, so you can click here and you can start seeing a whole description related to workflows. So if you have descriptions, would be here, such as this one. You can see the type, who owns that workflow, where that actually is. As you can see, it's all public, but it's all on a different studio. You can see here that we have a private studio, for example, for myself here, Fernando Vizcaino Studios, but we have one also called data science. So here maybe we have multiple users there, right? That really depends on the configuration of that specific studio. You can see the upload date and how many times a workflow was run. And this basically, it's not related to scheduled runs, but it's more related to manual runs. So if the end users enter there and runs that workflow, this is what you are seeing. The number of times that workflow is being used by end users. One other thing that you can start doing here. So of course, if you have a lot of workflows, public workflows, you can start filtering for to find what you actually want, right? But you can start also searching throughout the whole gallery using this search bar here. So the idea there, for example, so let's search for the finance keyword. So you'll start seeing all the workflows that you have access to, all the insights, all the districts, pages. So everything that you have access to, and it is in the gallery and has that keyword. So it can be on the finance district. As you can see here, there are a lot of workflows that don't have this word, this keyword in it, but may be related to a collection called finance, a district called finance. So that's the whole idea when you are searching. And that's, of course, will be in a great value if I have a lot of assets there. And by assets, I mean workflows macros, right? So, all right, so we have a lot of workflows here, and you want to start organizing all of them. So you can see here, for example, the finance district here. You have a lot of different ones. You can have one, as I mentioned before, one for you to start organizing your macros or your examples for the end user to start seeing what you are able to do from within the Alteryx gallery. So that's one idea for you guys. So, okay, and when you enter in a specific district, you are seeing everything that was shared there. Of course, you have ways of including a workflow here that I'm going to show later during this session, actually. But that's basically it. Ways for you to organize everything that you have there in a public matter. So moving forward, actually, so I have your private studio. So it can be my own private studio, but it can be for multiple users private studio. And it's basically the same idea. So you can start filtering if you have a lot of different workflows. You can see that we can have workflows, analytical apps, as well as macros. And from here, from the studio, is that when you start thinking about sharing with other users. So in your studio, only artisans, only developers has access to that. But if you want to share that with the end user, then you need to start thinking about collections. So as you can see here, since I showed you that I have permission to create collections, so I have this button here, but also I have access to other collections that was shared with me before. So for example, I have one here for QuickBooks, that's mine. It's my personal collection there. I don't have any users there. It's mine for me to organize everything that is happening there. I have 2 workflows only, but we have one additional collection there for the enablement team where I have a lot of material. So I have the workflow count, the insight count, and the user count as well. So for start creating, fairly simple, very straightforward. The only thing that you need to provide is a collection name. And when you add that, you will have a clean collection for you to start adding users, adding workflows, and everything related to what you want to share with the users. So this, I think, it's my personal opinion, this is the most important part from the user side overview. So it's all coming from private studios. So we have all the workflows here. As you can see, we have a lot of different owners. So the idea there is that I added these users to this collection, and I gave permissions to them to start adding workflows or other users, for example. So as you can see here, we have the run count, we have the type. It's basically the same idea as you have on districts, private studios, or in your homepage. You can start using insights here as well. You can start sharing that with end users. You can start sharing your schedules. So for example, you will be out of office during the next week, and you want other users to start managing your schedules. So one way of doing that is for you to add that schedule to a specific collection and share that collection to other users, other admin users that will be responsible for checking your schedules, right? You can start adding your Active Directory users here. And for them, you have a lot of different permissions. So you can have the users as an admin. So they will be able to include everything related to assets as well as users. And here I have the button only as an example, but for me personally, so I'm an admin, so I can leave this as it is, but I can also give access. So let's say that I'm the collection owner and I want to provide access to another user that will only be managing the users or the assets. So I want a developer that will be managing all the assets that are included here in this specific collection. So I have the curator managing the whole gallery, but you can have collection admins that could be artisans, for example, managing this specific part. So the idea here is for you to leverage the developer to start sharing everything with end users or anyone that he could think of. All right. But here also, since as you can see here, it's all manual, you are adding user by user, but you can start adding user groups as well. So it can be a custom user group that the creator defined there and include a specific number of users, but it could come from the Active Directory as well. Okay, so you could have, for example, an Active Directory group related to Alteryx developers or Alteryx administrators or the finance team, and that you can use to include everything there. So it's only a matter for it to include. So when a user enters the company, is hired, so it's automatic goes to a specific user group inside the Active Directory, and that will include the user here automatically as well. All right. Moving forward here, so workflows. So the idea for workflow is that you can have access to the specific page from the various pages there. But the idea is that from your private studio, if you are the owner, the workflow owner, then you start seeing this specific page here. And from here, actually, so of course, a lot of information happening here going on. But the first thing that you can start thinking about is making your workflow public. So you have here a switch, and that's the idea. So if you make your workflow public, it will go directly to your home page. And if you want to organize that better, so if you want to add that to a specific district, for example, then you can start adding tags. So all of these tags are created by the admins, the curators, but you can use the way you like. Of course, you can have a production tag that is separated to a specific district there. So you can have a production tag related to a production district, but you can have a development tag related to a production district. So one best practice that I can actually share with you here is that always keep your tags the same, with the same name as your districts. So the user will have an idea of where everything is going, right? So the idea here, so if I want this workflow to start appearing on a specific district, so I can include a tag there. We have versioning as well. So as a developer, and if I have a lot of different users there, so that's ways for collaborating. But if I want to, for example, if I'm developing that on a daily basis, and I don't want to lose all the versions that I'm creating, so you can have here version administration. And of course, if you want to download that workflow, so this will download the workflow manually, but you can also download that and open the workflow in your gallery from the Alteryx Designer. But here is for you to download the file physically. So you are basically downloading a zip file there. It's a YXZP, that is the zip file in Alteryx, but that's basically the idea. If you want to actually have that separated as a backup for you. But if you want to actually start using another version, so for example, you want to roll back to a different version, or if you want to run a version that was from a month ago, that's something that you can do here as well. So you can run a specific version, or you can make that the published version. The published one will be the version that all the users there that has access to that workflow will run. All right. So for example, here, when you think about versions, so you can have, and you can have also comments here. So if you have one workflow that you need to customize on a weekly basis, and you don't want to lose everything that you've done prior to that, then you can have here one workflow per week. And if you want to run that once again to verify something, then you can do that by running a selected version. You have here the workflow settings as well. So you as the workflow owner can define if others will be able to download this workflow manually, if that workflow can be run on the gallery, and if others can see the workflow history. So for example, if you have more than one user inside your studio, and you want those developers to start seeing everything that you are doing related to this workflow, then you can start sharing this. And of course, if you have a multi-node environment, you can think about migrating this workflow from your dev environment to your production environment, as well as assigning a specific worker. So if I'm from the data science team and I want this workflow to be run in a specific data science node, so that's something that I'm able to do here, as long as if I have the permissions to do so. And I can also define here the mode that workflow will be run. So if you recall, during our last session, we had one configuration on the system settings related to the run mode as well. So that's more of a default for all the workflows. But here you can set that manually to which workflow that you are running. You have ways of scheduling. And if you don't have this button enabled, so that means that you don't have permissions to schedule, all right? But when we think about scheduling, we have three options there. You can schedule that workflow to run once. You can schedule that workflow to run on an hourly basis, daily basis, weekly basis, doesn't matter, or a custom run. You can add comments, you can assign a worker, the priority, but here is something that you need to have permission to do so as well. So, okay, so what happens if you want to start actually creating dependencies between workflows? So you don't want this workflow to be run on a weekly basis. You want this workflow to run after another workflow runs. So that's something that we'll be covering during our 6th session there, related to gather APIs. So you can miss, right? Actually, all the sessions are equally important. So, but if you have that dependence between workflows and you want to run that in a more dynamic fashion, that's something that we can start leveraging gather APIs to do. Okay. But here, related to the workflow itself, so we have here also all the jobs that was run. So as you can see here, I have everything, all the dates. So the idea here is that you have all the information related to all the times that you run a workflow. And it can be manually, it can be scheduled here, but the idea is that, okay, so you run this workflow on a monthly basis, and maybe you don't have the output of the workflow that you run previous months, and you want to run that workflow once again to get that information. So one thing that you can do, so you don't need to run the workflow once again. It's only a matter for you to click on a specific workflow here and get the output data from that workflow specifically. Okay, so that's one thing. Of course, we have talked about on a previous session as well, related to the number of days that the gallery will keep those results. But the idea there, so if you're using 120 days, as we suggested, so the idea is that you have for 4 months, all the information there related to all the runs that you have done in that workflow. And also here, of course, you have your jobs, but you have all the jobs that was shared with you as well. But since we are on the workflow perspective here, so this only jobs that were created for this specific workflow. So if you have multiple users inside that specific private studio and other users shared or create jobs for that workflow as well, then you'll be seeing that here. So the same workflow running multiple times for yourself and maybe for another user there. And lastly, you will be able to run your workflow. And we think, of course, when we think about running, you have two options here. And you think about inputs. So you have the first option there where you have no questions. You have nothing here that you need to provide for your workflow to run. But you have another option there that you have user interface. So that's something that we're going to talk about during our science session. It's related to analytical apps. But the idea is that if you have any information that is needed from the end user to run that workflow. So that's something that you can automatize here as well. So let's say, for example, the user needs to provide their credentials for a data source, or they need to provide a file for your workflow to run, or an email to a specific file to be sent. So that's a few examples here. That's something that you can start leveraging when using the server and also analytical apps, right? All right, so you click run here and you have a few options here as well for outputs. So when we think about outputs, of course, the first one, the simple one, it could be nothing, right? So it could be an email sent to a specific user, but it could be also a file being updated in a share folder. But if you want to show that in your gallery and start sharing the outputs with your users, so the first one, that you can share a file. Of course, you have multiple formats here. Here we have a sample of the file. You can have multiple files being shared from within one workflow. You can also start creating, for example, reports there for the user to start seeing. So the first one, for example, it can be a table, a simple table there. You can have everything customized here for the user to start, and also download. That's the most important thing. So the user will be able to check that on the gallery, but will be also able to download that file if they want to. Lastly here, so we have an option to start developing very nice reports for the end user. So as you can see here, we will be able to include maps. You will be able to customize everything here. It can be related to the user form, to the form that the user has filled prior to running. And here, for example, it's an analysis for a specific store related to a specific amount of user. So it's all customized. And that's something that you can start leveraging by using analytical apps, plus the reporting category. And that's, we are going to be showing a few examples there during our last session, actually. But moving forward here, so the idea for the workflows, for you to start sharing to any user there from within your company, within your gallery, and you can provide to that user ability to select what he actually wants to do with that workflow. If they want to send an email, if they want to see a report, or if they want to use that same workflow, but use his own personal file on that workflow. So that's a few of the options that we are going to be seeing as well. But moving forward here, we are almost at the end, but the idea is that you have the workflow results page as well. Here you can see that we have access to all the jobs. It's all mine, all personal, or the jobs that were shared with me. But the idea here is that I have access to all the logging information related to any workflow. So it's the same logging information as you have in your Alteryx Designer when you run a workflow. But also, if you click here, for example, in this link for this specific workflow, you will be able to also see the outputs. All of those outputs that I showed you on the last slide. So that's something that you can start checking here. And it doesn't matter when. So it can be from one year before, as long as you have that configured as a rule of persistence in your MongoDB, then you'll be able to see everything that was run before by you. And also the admin will be able to see that everything that was run by any user at any specific time. Okay. Lastly here, actually, it's not last, it's the last option here, but we're going to be talking about insights once again. But the idea for the schedules here, so you can see everything that you have scheduled. right? And if you want, so for example, let me click on a specific schedule here. So here I can see all the statistics related to that specific schedule. So how many times that schedule runs. In this case, only once. And you can see all the information here that was configured, the owner. If I want, I'm able to edit the same way as if I were using the schedule button there. But I can see once again here, everything related to that specific job, to that specific schedule. And here, the same way as in workflow results, or the same way as if I manage a specific workflow, I'm able to see all the login information as well as all the outputs for that workflow, right? Now, our last page, and that's something that we are talking about a lot during our previous session about insights. The idea for insights is that it's not a workflow, it's not an analytical apps. The idea there is that you have an interactive chart for the users to start filtering, drilling down, or anything there. So as you can see, it's a great functionality there. So if you want to start providing for your end user interactive experience there, so that's something that you can do. So you can have filters, you can have a lot of different charts. You can start drilling down here. So for example, you have city here, but if you click in a city, you can go to a specific zip code. So that's one thing that you always need to be aware when thinking about sharing information with your end users. All right. But that's it for today, guys. I hope you have enjoyed everything here that I have talked about. Of course, we have more sessions coming for you to start understanding how to leverage the admin side, for you to start controlling or managing your end users, your artisan, as well as your curators. We'll have 2 more sessions related to gallery APIs and also analytical apps. That's very important for the developer that wants to start calling the workflow from a different platform. But the analytical apps is one of the greatest functionalities that we have here inside a gallery, inside Alteryx Designer, inside Alteryx Gallery, and you'll be able to start including that to your end user, right? So the end user who has no experience whatsoever with Alteryx Designer will be able to start customizing their reports by using analytical apps. So great stuff coming on here. Let me see if I have any questions there. So does the insights page allow Alteryx charts, or can it accept integrated Tableau external tools? So it only accepts Alteryx charts, and it's all done by the insights tool from the Alteryx Designer. So you can't use Tableau or Click for it to start leveraging Alteryx Gallery. Of course, you have connectors for it to start using, right? For it to connect to Tableau or to any other data views tool there. But that's basically it. Do you want to answer that, Thales? I'm seeing here that you would like to answer this question live, actually.
No, actually, I just because you're answering that, I clicked on that. But
Okay.
you're good.
Yeah. So Thales is here as well. As I can see, the challenge is here. So he answered everything there. So if you have any more questions there that you want us to cover, you can send us an email. You can talk to our sales team here for us to prepare a demo for you. But that's it for today, guys. Thank you for attending this session. We have 3 more sessions there, 3 very interesting sessions coming on next week. So that's it, guys. Have a nice day, a nice weekend, I think, if you are hoping for that as well. So bye.